The abduction. The first thing Daylin remembered was the cold. It seeped into his bones like ice, numbing his senses before he could even comprehend his surroundings. His head throbbed, his vision blurred, and the taste of metal lingered on his tongue. Wherever he was, it wasn't Earth. When he finally managed to sit up, he took in the sterile walls, smooth and silver, humming with an unfamiliar energy. Dim blue lights flickered along the edges of the floor, casting eerie shadows on the curved ceiling. Not a hospital. Not a prison. Then where, low, guttural voice snapped him out of his daze. You're awake. Good. Daylin turned his head sharply, his muscles still sluggish. The speaker was unlike anything he had ever seen before, tall, insectoid, with chitinous armor covering its elongated limbs. Its multifaceted eyes reflected the dim light, unreadable and cold. Who the hell are you? Daylin's voice came out rough, his throat dry. The creature clicked its mandibles before responding. You are aboard a Zenthari research vessel. You have been selected. Selected, Daylin repeated, pushing himself to his feet. A wave of dizziness hit him, but he fought to steady himself. For what? To understand what makes your species dangerous. Dangerous? Daylin almost laughed. He was just a mechanic. An ordinary guy who had no business being abducted by aliens. But something in the creature's tone sent a chill down his spine. Before he could ask more, movement in the shadows caught his attention. He wasn't alone. Figures lined the far side of the room, other prisoners. Some looked humanoid, others less so. Among them was a woman with dark emerald skin, golden eyes burning with defiance. She was watching him carefully, assessing him like a predator sizing up a threat. Who are you? Daylin asked. Liara, she said simply. And you're the first human I've seen in this hellhole. How long have you been here? Long enough to know there's no rescue coming. Her gaze hardened. But there's a way out. If you're not too weak to take it. Daylin exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. He didn't belong here. But if there was a way out, he wasn't about to sit around waiting for some aliens to decide his fate. What's the plan? Liara smirked. You keep up, and maybe I'll tell you. Before their conversation could continue, the door slid open with a hiss. Two more Zenthari entered, their armor sleeker, more advanced than the first ones. One of them held a long staff-like weapon, its tip crackling with energy. The human will come with us, one of them declared. Liara tensed, her golden eyes narrowing. Don't go with them, she muttered. Daylin clenched his fists. Why? Because no one who does ever comes back. The guards approached, and Daylin had a choice to make. Obey, or fight. And for some reason, every instinct in his body screamed, fight. Awakening the beast. The Zenthari guards moved swiftly, their insectoid limbs gliding effortlessly as they advanced on Daylin. Their armored bodies gave off a faint, metallic sheen, and their faceless, multifaceted eyes reflected the dim blue light of the room. Daylin's pulse pounded in his ears. Everything in his mind screamed at him to comply, to go with them quietly, to avoid confrontation. But deep in his gut, another instinct rumbled to life. It was ancient, primal. A voice that told him these creatures had no intention of letting him walk out of here alive. He wasn't just being taken. He was being culled. Move, human, one of the Zenthari barked, the energy staff crackling menacingly. Daylin took a slow breath, feeling his muscles tense. No. Before the Zenthari could react, Daylin lunged. The first kill. It happened faster than he expected. His body moved with a speed that didn't feel like his own. He ducked under the first staff swing, then drove his fist into the nearest Zenthari's chest. Crack. The exoskeleton buckled under the force of his punch, sending the alien staggering backward. Daylin barely had time to register his own strength before the second guard lashed out. The staff's energy arced toward him, a burning blue light that hissed through the air. Daylin twisted to the side just in time, feeling the heat graze past his shoulder. Too slow, something in his brain whispered. Be faster. His foot shot forward, planting into the second Zenthari's knee. The alien shrieked as its leg snapped backward at an unnatural angle, collapsing onto the ground. A split second later, Daylin was on top of him, grabbing the Zenthari's own staff and driving it into its throat. The alien convulsed. The energy crackled violently before its body went limp. Daylin stared down at his shaking hands. He had just killed something. But what shocked him more than that was how easy it had been. Fear spreads. The other prisoners were silent. Liara was the first to move, stepping forward with an expression Daylin couldn't quite read. What the hell was that? She asked, her voice somewhere between awe and suspicion. I don't know, Daylin admitted. His body still hummed with energy. His heart should have been hammering in panic. Instead, he felt calm. Alert. Stronger than he had ever felt in his entire life. Liara glanced at the corpse, then back at Daylin. Humans aren't supposed to be this strong. Daylin frowned. I'm not. But Liara's gaze didn't waver. Not normal ones, maybe. Before Daylin could argue, the ship's alarms blared to life. They knew. Experiment 047. Across the vast corridors of the Zenthari ship, deep within the control chamber, a figure observed the scene through holographic displays. Grand Researcher Vorik leaned forward, his many fingers twitching in fascination. So, the experiment has begun. A lower-ranking Zenthari scientist trembled beside him. We should eliminate him now. Before it spreads. Vorik ignored the pathetic fear in his subordinate's voice. The human had already killed 2 trained warriors, without weapons, without enhancements. Something had awakened in him. And Vorik had an idea of what it was. No, the researcher murmured, his mandibles clicking in thought. We watch. We study. We see just how far he can go. The escape begins. Back in the prisoner chamber, Daylin barely had time to catch his breath before the reinforced doors slammed open. More Zenthari soldiers stormed in, larger, armored, armed with far deadlier weapons. Back, Liara hissed, grabbing Daylin's arm. We can't fight them all. She yanked him toward the side wall, pressing a hidden panel. The metal slid open, revealing a dark maintenance tunnel. Inside, now. Daylin hesitated. He didn't want to run. His instincts were screaming at him to tear through the enemy, to fight like an animal backed into a corner. But he forced himself to listen. The time for full war wasn't now. As the first plasma shots fired, Daylin and Liara dove into the passage, the door sliding shut behind them. This way, Liara whispered, leading them through the cramped tunnel. If we make it to the docking bay, we might have a chance to get off this ship. Daylin nodded, his breath steady. His hands still tingled from the fight. His body still burned with unnatural energy. He didn't know what was happening to him. But one thing was certain. He wasn't the same man who had woken up in that cell. And the Zenthari had just made a grave mistake. No rescue is coming. The tunnel was narrow and damp, lined with exposed cables and flickering lights. Daylin followed Liara through the cramped passage, his mind racing. The surge of power he had felt during the fight still hummed in his veins, like a fire just beneath his skin. What's happening to me? The Zenthari should have overpowered him easily, yet he had broken them like twigs. Stop, Liara whispered, holding up a hand. She pressed her ear against the wall. Daylin held his breath. Faint voices echoed from the other side, their insect-like clicking barely muffled by the metal. They know we're loose, she muttered. Daylin exhaled sharply. Of course, they do. I killed 2 of them. Liara turned to face him, her sharp golden eyes scanning his face. You're not like any human I've ever met. He shook his head. I don't feel like one anymore. She frowned. What do you mean? He hesitated. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Before he could answer, the voices outside grew louder. We need to move, Liara whispered. Come on. They continued down the tunnel, the faint hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the walls. Daylin clenched his fists. He had no idea what they were walking into. But something inside him had awakened. And he wasn't sure he wanted to stop it. Meanwhile, on the command deck, Grand Researcher Vorik watched the surveillance feeds with unblinking eyes. The human was evolving. His species was already dangerous enough, even in their natural state. But this one was becoming something more. Commander, Vorik clicked, his voice cold. Deploy the enforcers. I want him alive. A heavily armored Zenthari warrior saluted. Yes, Grand Researcher. As the commander left, Vorik leaned back, his mandibles twitching in amusement. Let's see just how much you can take, human. Ambushed. Daylin and Liara reached the end of the maintenance tunnel, emerging into a dimly lit corridor. The docking bay was close. Just a few more turns. But before they could take another step, the walls shifted. Panels slid open on either side, and armored Zenthari enforcers poured in. Run, Liara shouted. Daylin didn't run. The enforcers lunged at him, energy blades humming to life. Move. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He sidestepped the first strike, grabbing the enforcer's wrist and twisting. The alien screeched as its own blade was driven into its chest. Another Zenthari swung a staff at his head. Daylin ducked, then slammed his fist into the soldier's gut. Crack. The armor shattered like glass. Daylin blinked. That shouldn't have been possible. But before he could process it, another enemy attacked. He moved like a phantom, faster than he ever had before. Every punch, every kick landed with devastating force. Within seconds, the enforcers lay broken at his feet. Liara stared at him. What the hell was that? Daylin's hands shook. Not from exhaustion. From something deeper. I don't know, he said. But I don't think I need a rescue anymore. Liara exhaled sharply. Then let's get off this damn ship before you tear it apart. They ran. Behind them, alarms blared. The hunt had just begun. Hunted by the unseen. The docking bay was close. Daylin could feel it, like an instinct buried deep in his bones. Every step he took sent a pulse of energy through his body, a strange rhythm in sync with the ship's vibrations. He wasn't just moving. He was adapting. But something was wrong. Liara suddenly skidded to a stop, pressing her back against the cold metal wall. She grabbed Daylin's arm and yanked him into the shadows beside her. Wait, she hissed. Do you hear that? Daylin strained his ears. Silence. And that was the problem. No alarms. No pursuit. The Zenthari were never this quiet. They're setting a trap, Liara whispered. Daylin flexed his fingers. Let them try. No. She shook her head. We don't fight unless we have to. We slip past them, get to the docking bay, and steal a ship. Daylin exhaled slowly. Every fiber of his being screamed to fight, to tear through anything that stood in his way. But she was right. If they wasted time fighting, more reinforcements would come. They had to move smart. The unseen enemy. They moved cautiously through the corridors, sticking to the shadows. Daylin followed Liara's lead, mimicking her movements as she expertly avoided the security drones and motion sensors. But the deeper they went, the heavier the air became. Daylin's skin tingled. Something was watching them. "Stop," he muttered. Liara froze. "What is it?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But we're not alone." She frowned and reached for her plasma pistol. Then, THK. A shadow shifted in the corner of Daylin's vision. Without thinking, he grabbed Liara and dove forward just as a black tendril lashed out from the ceiling. It struck the floor where they had been standing, sizzling against the metal. Daylin rolled onto his feet, dragging Liara up with him. "Move!" They sprinted down the corridor, but the shadows followed. The walls themselves seemed to ripple. Something was slithering through the vents, moving in unnatural ways. "They sent a void stalker after us," Liara gasped. Daylin didn't know what that meant. But he felt it. Whatever this thing was, it was worse than the Zenthari soldiers. Much worse. Nowhere to run. They rounded a corner. And hit a dead end. A massive security door blocked their path, sealed shut with reinforced plating. Liara cursed. "We need time to override it." Daylin turned. The corridor behind them was now pitch black. The Void Stalker was coming. He clenched his fists. "You work on the door," he said. "I'll hold it off." Liara's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Daylin smirked. "Not if I win." Before she could argue, the darkness moved. The Void Stalker lunged. Daylin reacted instantly, dodging just as a razor-sharp limb sliced through the air where his head had been. He countered with a punch. His fist connected with something solid, something cold. For the first time, the Void Stalker hesitated. It hadn't expected him to fight back. Daylin grinned. Surprise. He lunged. His body moved on instinct, his strikes landing harder and faster than he thought possible. The Void Stalker screeched, recoiling from his attacks. But it wasn't done. It struck back, its tendrils wrapping around Daylin's limbs, trying to crush him. He roared. Energy surged through him. His muscles burned, his bones ached, but he pushed forward. With one final, earth-shattering blow, he ripped through the Void Stalker's center. It let out a piercing shriek, then collapsed into a puddle of inky blackness. Daylin staggered back, panting. He had won. But something inside him had changed. The escape. "Got it," Liara shouted. The security door hissed open. Daylin shook off his dizziness and ran after her. Beyond the door, the docking bay stretched out before them. Ships. Weapons. Freedom. But standing between them and escape was an entire army of Zenthari. Liara's face paled. "We're dead." Daylin rolled his shoulders. "No," he said, stepping forward. "They are. The last stand." The docking bay stretched before them, a massive expanse of sleek alien ships, flashing control panels, and towering mechanical arms. Beyond the force field at the far end, the cold abyss of space loomed, calling them to freedom. But standing between them and escape was an army. Hundreds of Zenthari soldiers, clad in their obsidian battle armor, weapons humming with deadly energy. Their crimson eyes glowed as they moved in eerie synchronization, surrounding Daylin and Liara in an unbreakable formation. Liara tensed beside him, gripping her plasma pistol, her breathing sharp and uneven. "There's too many," she muttered. "We can't fight them all." Daylin, still pulsing with the strange energy from his fight with the Void Stalker, stepped forward. His body no longer felt human, his senses sharper, his muscles coiled like a predator on the verge of pouncing. He looked at the nearest Zenthari commander, a towering brute with jagged armor and a sneer etched into his reptilian face. You want a fight? Dalen said, rolling his shoulders. His fists clenched. Come and get it. The storm breaks. The Zenthari hesitated. Just for a second. Then. Fire. The room erupted in chaos. Energy bolts screeched through the air, streaks of red and blue lighting up the docking bay. Liara dove behind a crate, returning fire with deadly precision, her shots taking down enemy after enemy. Dalen? He charged. Blaster fire burned against his skin, but he barely felt it. His mind was clear, his body moving faster than thought. He crashed into the first wave of soldiers, his fists tearing through armor as if it were paper. 1. 2. 5. They fell like dominoes. He grabbed a Zenthari by the throat and threw him into a group of soldiers, sending them sprawling. Another leapt at him with an energy blade. Dalen caught his wrist, twisted, and snapped it like a twig. A roar tore from his throat as he fought, primal and unrelenting. The Zenthari had numbers. But Dalen had something else. Something stronger. Something unstoppable. Liara's gamble. Dalen, the ship, Liara shouted over the chaos. She had found a small, agile-looking starfighter docked near the far wall. Perfect for a quick escape, if they could reach it. Dalen saw it. But the Zenthari saw it too. More troops rushed in, blocking their path. No, not this time. Dalen slammed his fist into the ground. The force of it sent a shockwave rippling outward, knocking Zenthari off their feet. Metal plating buckled beneath him, the sheer strength of his attack sending crack spiderwebbing across the floor. The soldiers hesitated. Their confidence wavered. He was just a human. So why did he fight like a god? Liara seized the opportunity, grabbing Dalen's arm and yanking him toward the starfighter. Move! They sprinted, dodging the last of the enemy fire. Liara vaulted into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. The ship roared to life. Dalen leapt onto the wing, then into the co-pilot's seat just as the docking bay doors slammed shut. They're sealing us in, Liara yelled. Dalen glanced at the console. Missiles. He grinned. Not for long. The final shot. Dalen slammed his fist onto the targeting controls. The ship's missile launchers locked onto the thick metal doors. Fire. The explosion rocked the entire station. The doors shredded apart, debris flying into the vacuum of space. The force field flickered and died. Their escape was open. Liara gritted her teeth and pushed the thrusters to maximum. The starfighter shot forward, bursting through the wreckage and out into the black void beyond. For a moment, all was silent. Then, the Zenthari station erupted into alarms. Fighters scrambled to pursue, their engines flaring as they gave chase. Dalen leaned back, exhaling slowly. They're not going to let us go that easy, are they? Liara smirked, flipping a switch. Let's see them try. The starfighter vanished into hyperspace, leaving the Zenthari fleet behind. Epilogue, something more. Hours later, as the endless stars streaked past them, Liara finally spoke. Back there, you weren't human. Dalen flexed his fingers, still feeling the echoes of that unnatural strength pulsing through him. I don't know what I am anymore. She studied him carefully, her violet eyes gleaming. Whatever you are, she said, you saved my life. He chuckled. You saved mine first. A small smile tugged at her lips. So what now? Dalen leaned back, staring at the stars. Now? His grin returned. We find out what happens when a human doesn't need a rescue. The end.